What would you do if saving a stranger's life meant certain death for yourself? What if that stranger wasn't even human? In the depths of space, where survival depends on cold calculations and logical decisions, one human made a choice that defied every rule of self-preservation. A choice that would ripple across the galaxy and change the fate of two entire species forever. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a salvage operator who thought he was just doing his job, until he discovered that sometimes the greatest rewards come from the most impossible sacrifices. Sometimes humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. Sometimes it's simply our refusal to let someone die alone in the dark. What Marcus didn't know was that his act of compassion would unlock secrets that had been hidden for millennia, and that the alien woman he saved would offer him something beyond his wildest imagination, if he could survive long enough to claim it. Marcus Chun pressed his face against the viewport of his salvage vessel, the Wandering Star, and stared at the wreckage floating in the void ahead. The twisted remains of what had once been a sleek spacecraft tumbled slowly through space, its hull torn open like a flower blooming in reverse. Emergency lights flickered weakly from within the debris field, casting eerie shadows that danced across the metal fragments. "Control, this is Salvage 7 Alpha." Marcus spoke into his comm headset, his breath fogging the cold glass before him. "I've got visual on the wreck. Looks like a complete structural failure. No signs of life." The crackling voice of Sarah Martinez, his handler back at Titan Station, came through the speakers. "Copy that, 7 Alpha. Standard protocol applies. Scan for valuable tech and materials, but don't spend more than 6 hours out there. The solar storm warning is still active." Marcus nodded, though she couldn't see him. Solar storms in this sector were notorious for their intensity. If one hit while he was outside his ship, the radiation would cook him alive before he could make it back to safety. He had maybe 8 hours before the next wave arrived, according to the latest projections. He suited up methodically, checking each seal twice. 20 years of salvage work had taught him that space didn't forgive carelessness. The environment suit was old but reliable, with enough air for 12 hours and radiation shielding that could handle minor exposure. Not enough for a full solar storm, but sufficient for normal operations. The Wandering Star was a small ship, designed for single-person operations. Marcus had bought it with his savings after leaving the Earth Defense Force, trading military discipline for the freedom of independent salvage work. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough, and he answered to no one but himself. As he approached the wreckage in his EVA suit, Marcus activated his scanner. The device hummed to life, painting holographic displays across his helmet's heads-up display. The ship had been beautiful once, he realized. Its lines were elegant, almost organic, unlike the angular designs favored by human engineers. The hull material was something he didn't recognize, a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Definitely alien," he muttered to himself. But which species? The galaxy was full of alien civilizations, though humans had only made contact with a handful. The Covenant of Rational Thought, a collective of species that valued logic above all else, was humanity's primary trading partner. Then, there were the hegemony worlds, militaristic and expansionist, constantly probing human space for weaknesses. But this ship didn't match the design principles of either faction. Marcus maneuvered carefully through the debris field, using his suit's small thrusters to navigate between chunks of twisted metal. His scanner was picking up unusual energy signatures from deeper within the wreck. Something was still powered, despite the obvious catastrophic damage. He found an opening in the hull large enough for him to squeeze through. The ship's internal structure was as alien as its exterior, with corridors that curved in impossible ways and rooms that seemed to flow into one another without clear boundaries. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow. Marcus activated his helmet's recording system. Personal log, timestamp 2387.156.14. Exploring unknown alien vessel. Architecture suggests advanced understanding of spatial dynamics. Gravity generators still partially functional. He could feel the artificial gravity pulling at him, though it was weaker than Earth normal. His boots made soft clanking sounds as he walked through what might have been a corridor or might have been something else entirely. The walls were covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he watched, like living text. That's when he heard it. A sound that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space. A soft, rhythmic noise that his suit's audio pickups were somehow detecting. Marcus froze, his heart rate spiking. Sound meant atmosphere. Atmosphere meant someone might still be alive in here. Following the sound, Marcus made his way deeper into the ship. The noise grew stronger, more distinct. It was definitely breathing, but the rhythm was wrong for human lungs. Too slow, too deep. He turned a corner and found himself in what could only be described as a medical bay. The room was bathed in soft blue light emanating from crystalline structures embedded in the walls. Medical equipment, or at least what Marcus assumed was medical equipment, surrounded a raised platform in the center of the room. And on that platform lay a figure that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that transcended species. Humanoid, but with subtle differences that marked her as clearly alien. Her skin had a faint luminescent quality, pale blue-white, like moonlight on snow. Her hair, if it could be called hair, was a cascade of what looked like living fiber optics, each strand glowing with its own internal light. She was tall, probably 6.5 feet, with proportions that were elegant and somehow predatory. But she was dying. Marcus didn't need medical training to see that. Her breathing was labored, and the light from her hair was flickering like a dying bulb. The medical equipment around her was clearly trying to keep her alive, but it was failing. Red warning symbols pulsed on screens he couldn't read. "Control, this is 7 Alpha, Marcus said into his comm. "I've got a survivor here. Alien female, appears to be in critical condition." Sarah's voice crackled back immediately. 7 Alpha, what's your status? Did you say survivor? Confirmed. She's alive, but barely. The ship's medical systems are failing. There was a long pause before Sarah responded. Marcus, you know the protocols. First contact situations require a full diplomatic team. You need to mark the location and return to base immediately. Marcus stared at the alien woman. Her breathing was becoming more erratic. Whatever was keeping her alive wouldn't last much longer. By the time a diplomatic team arrived, she would be dead. Understood, Control, he said. But he made no move to leave. Instead, Marcus approached the medical platform. The alien woman's eyes fluttered open as he drew near, and he found himself looking into irises that swirled like liquid silver. There was intelligence there, and pain, and something that might have been hope. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her lips moved, forming words in a language Marcus couldn't understand. But he didn't need to understand the words to recognize a plea for help. Marcus looked around the medical bay, trying to make sense of the alien technology. Most of it was completely foreign to him, but some concepts seemed universal. He could see what looked like life support monitors, and they were definitely showing declining vital signs. I'm going to try to help you, Marcus said, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. Just hang on. He began examining the medical equipment more carefully. Some of the displays showed recognizable patterns, heartbeat, brain activity, what might have been blood pressure. But the technology was far beyond anything human medicine could offer. The devices seemed to work on principles he couldn't even begin to fathom. That's when Marcus noticed the power readings. The ship's main reactor was completely offline, running on emergency power only. The medical bay was drawing more energy than the failing systems could provide. At the current rate of consumption, everything would shut down within the hour. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he realized what was happening. The ship had been running on emergency power since the accident, and that power was almost depleted. When it ran out, life support would fail, and the alien woman would die. But Marcus had a solution, if he was willing to take the risk. His ship, the Wandering Star, had a portable power cell designed for exactly this kind of situation. It could provide enough energy to keep the medical systems running for days. But connecting it would mean staying here while the solar storm approached. It would mean risking his own life for someone he'd never met, someone who wasn't even human. Control, I'm going to attempt emergency life support, Marcus said into his comm, -7 Alpha. Sarah's voice was sharp with alarm. You have 6 hours before storm onset. That's barely enough time to return to safe distance. Do not attempt any rescue procedures. Marcus looked down at the alien woman. Her silver eyes had focused on him with startling clarity. Somehow, she understood what was happening. She knew he was considering risking his life for her. And, in those eyes, Marcus saw something that made his decision for him. She wasn't giving up. Despite the pain, despite being alone and dying in the wreckage of her ship, she was still fighting to live. That kind of determination deserved respect, regardless of species. "Sorry, Control," Marcus said. "I'm going to need that diplomatic team after all." He cut the communication channel and began working. The power cell from his ship was heavy, designed to be moved by maintenance drones rather than a man in an EVA suit. But Marcus had spent years doing this kind of work, and he knew how to improvise. Using cutting tools from his salvage kit, he created a path through the debris and carefully maneuvered the power cell into the medical bay. Connecting alien technology to human power systems should have been impossible. The voltage requirements were different, the connectors were incompatible, and Marcus had no way of knowing if the power cell would overload the medical equipment. But he'd always been good with electronics, and desperation made him creative. Working faster than he ever had before, Marcus jury-rigged connections using spare cables and universal adapters from his kit. He bypassed safety systems and crossed his fingers as he activated the power transfer. The medical equipment hummed to life with renewed vigor. Warning lights stopped flashing, and the alien woman's breathing immediately became steadier. Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before reality crashed back down on him. He checked his suit's chronometer. The improvised repair had taken 3 hours. 3 hours closer to the solar storm. 3 hours less time to get back to his ship and reach minimum safe distance. But the alien woman was stable now, at least temporarily. The human power cell would keep her medical systems running for days, maybe weeks. Long enough for a proper rescue team to arrive. Marcus was about to head back to his ship when the alien woman spoke. Her voice was soft, musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She was speaking her own language, but something about her tone was unmistakable. She was thanking him. Marcus knelt beside the medical platform. "You're going to be okay," he said. "Help is coming." The alien woman reached out with one slender hand. Her fingers were longer than human fingers, with an extra joint, but the gesture was unmistakable. She wanted to touch him, to make contact with the strange being who had saved her life. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm, warmer than he'd expected, and there was a strange tingling sensation where they touched. For a moment, her silver eyes seemed to glow brighter, and Marcus felt something that might have been a presence at the edge of his consciousness. Then, the moment passed, and she released his hand. But she continued to watch him with those mesmerizing eyes as he stood to leave. Marcus was halfway back to his ship when Sarah's voice crackled through his comm system. "Marcus, the storm front is moving faster than predicted. You have 90 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. What's your status?" Marcus checked his suit's heads-up display. The return trip to his ship would take 40 minutes. Getting to minimum safe distance would take another hour and 20 minutes. The math was simple and unforgiving. He wasn't going to make it. "Control," Marcus said calmly. "I'm going to be cutting it close. Prepare emergency medical for radiation exposure." "Marcus, what did you do out there?" Marcus smiled grimly as he continued moving toward his ship. Something stupid. Something human. As he reached the wandering star, Marcus began emergency departure procedures. He could worry about the consequences later. Right now, he had a race to win against the solar wind, and he'd never been one to back down from a challenge. Behind him, in the alien medical bay, the woman he'd saved watched the human ship disappear into the void. Her medical systems were stable now, powered by his sacrifice. She was going to live because a strange alien being had chosen to risk everything for her. In her own language, she whispered a phrase that had no direct translation to English. But if Marcus could have understood it, he would have known that she had just sworn a debt of honor that would span worlds and change the course of galactic history. The solar storm was coming, and Marcus Chun was running out of time. But he'd made his choice, and he'd live with the consequences, if he lived at all. The wandering star shuddered as Marcus pushed its engines beyond their safety limits. The small salvage vessel wasn't designed for the kind of acceleration he was demanding, but it was the only chance he had of outrunning the approaching solar storm. Through the cockpit windows, he could see the first wisps of charged particles beginning to streak past, like deadly aurora dancing in the vacuum of space. Warning: engine temperature exceeding recommended parameters, the ship's computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Reduce thrust to prevent catastrophic failure. Not happening, Marcus muttered, keeping the throttle pushed forward. He'd rather risk an engine explosion than slow cook in radiation. His console lit up with warnings as the storm's leading edge caught up with him. Radiation levels spiked, and the ship's shielding began to strain under the assault. Marcus could hear the hull creaking around him as charged particles bombarded the vessel's exterior. "Control, this is 7 Alpha, Marcus called into his comm. "I'm in the storm front. Shielding is holding for now, but I'm not going to make minimum safe distance." Sarah's voice came back distorted by interference. "Marcus, find somewhere to shelter. There has to be an asteroid or a debris field you can hide behind." Marcus scanned his sensors, looking for anything that might provide protection. The storm was intensifying rapidly, turning space around him into a maelstrom of deadly energy. His ship's radiation detectors were screaming warnings, and he could feel the first effects beginning to take hold. Nausea crept up from his stomach, and his hands trembled slightly on the controls. That's when he saw it on his scanner. A massive object, roughly spherical, about 50 kilometers ahead. Too regular to be an asteroid, too large to be a ship. Marcus adjusted course toward it, pushing his failing engines even harder. As he approached, Marcus realized what he was looking at. It was a space station, but unlike any design he'd ever seen. The structure was enormous, easily 10 kilometers across, and its surface was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move as he watched. Parts of it were clearly damaged, dark sections where the patterns had gone dormant, but much of it still pulsed with alien energy. "Control, I've found shelter," Marcus reported. "Some kind of ancient space station. I'm going to try to dock." The response came back through heavy static. "Be careful, Marcus. That doesn't match any known architecture in our databases." Marcus guided his ship toward what looked like a docking bay, a circular aperture on the station's surface that seemed to respond to his approach. Mechanical structures unfolded like metallic flowers, creating a berth just the right size for the wandering star. Whatever intelligence had built this place, it was still partially active. The docking process was smooth, almost eerily so. Atmospheric containment fields engaged automatically, and Marcus felt the gentle thump of docking clamps securing his ship. Through his cockpit, he could see that the bay was pressurized and illuminated, though he had no idea how that was possible in what appeared to be a derelict station. Marcus checked his radiation readings. Outside the station, the solar storm was raging at full intensity, but here he was completely protected. The station's shielding was more effective than anything human technology could produce. "Looks like I'm going to be here for a while," Marcus said to himself. Solar storms in this region typically lasted 12 to 18 hours. He settled back in his pilot's chair and tried to get comfortable. That's when he heard the voice. It came through his ship's communication system, but it wasn't Sarah or anyone from Titan Station. The voice was female, speaking accented but perfect English with a musical quality that made Marcus's skin tingle with recognition. "Human vessel, you are welcome aboard the Nexus station. Please do not be alarmed." Marcus sat up straight, his heart racing. "Who is this? How do you know English?" "My name is Zarathes, though I believe your language lacks the proper phonemes for accurate pronunciation. You may call me Zara. I am the individual you rescued from the medical bay." Marcus stared at his communication console in disbelief. "That's impossible. You were dying. You're still on that wreck, and it's 50,000 kilometers from here." "Distance is a relative concept when one possesses the proper technology," Zara's voice replied with what might have been amusement. "I am indeed still within my ship's medical bay, but I am also here, in a sense. This station has quantum communication capabilities that allow instantaneous contact across vast distances." Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling the first stages of radiation sickness, making his thoughts fuzzy. "This is insane. How are you speaking English? How do you even know what English is?" "When you touched my hand, we briefly shared a neural connection. In that moment, I was able to access portions of your linguistic memory. It is a common ability among my people, though we rarely use it with other species. The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. She had been inside his mind, even if only briefly. She knew things about him that no alien should know. "Your people," Marcus said slowly. "What species are you?" "We call ourselves the ethereal. In your language, you might translate it as those who touch the void. We are an ancient race, much older than humanity. My vessel was damaged while I was conducting research in this sector." Marcus tried to process this information. The ethereal weren't in any human database. If they existed, it meant there was an entirely unknown alien civilization operating in this region of space. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "First contact protocols exist for a reason." "Because you saved my life without regard for protocols," Zara replied. "You risked everything for a being you had never seen before, knowing nothing about me or my people. Such acts of selfless courage are rare in the galaxy. They deserve to be acknowledged and rewarded." Through his cockpit windows, Marcus could see the solar storm raging outside the station's protective barriers. The space around them was alive with deadly energy, beautiful and terrible at the same time. "I don't need a reward," Marcus said. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Zara's voice was firm. "Most beings would not. Most would have calculated the risk and chosen self-preservation. Even among the ethereal, few would make such a sacrifice for an unknown alien. That is why I have brought you here." "You brought me here? I thought I found this station by accident." "There are no accidents when the ethereal are involved. I guided your ship to the Nexus station for your protection. The station's shielding will keep you safe during the storm, but, more importantly, it will allow us to speak privately." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the radiation sickness. "Speak about what?" "About the debt of honor you have created. In ethereal culture, a life debt is the most sacred of bonds. By saving my life at the risk of your own, you have created an obligation that must be fulfilled." "I don't want anything from you," Marcus protested. "I'm not looking for payment or rewards. I just wanted to help. And that is precisely why the debt exists," Zara said. "Your actions were motivated by compassion, not greed. Such purity of intent creates the strongest bonds. Whether you want it or not, the debt exists and must be honored." Marcus leaned back in his chair, trying to wrap his head around the situation. He'd gone from a simple salvage job to first contact with an unknown alien species to owing some kind of mystical debt. His day had definitely not gone according to plan. "Okay," Marcus said finally. "Let's say I accept that this debt exists. What does that mean exactly?" "It means that the resources of the ethereal are at your disposal, within certain limits. We are an ancient and powerful people, Marcus Chun. We possess technologies that would seem like magic to your species. We know secrets that could transform human civilization." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "You're talking about sharing advanced technology? That could change everything for humanity." "It could," Zara agreed. "But such gifts come with great responsibility. Power shared unwisely can destroy those who receive it. Before any technology transfer could occur, we would need to be certain that humanity is ready for such knowledge." "And how would you determine that?" "By observing humanity's representative," Zara said. "You, Marcus Chun, have become the bridge between our species. How you handle this responsibility will determine how my people view yours." The weight of that statement settled on Marcus like a physical burden. He was just a salvage operator, not a diplomat or a scientist. The idea that the fate of human ethereal relations rested on his shoulders was terrifying. "I'm not qualified for this," Marcus said. "I'm nobody special. I just fix things and haul scrap for a living." "You underestimate yourself," Zara replied. "I have touched your mind, however, briefly. I have seen your memories, your experiences, your core beliefs. You possess something that cannot be taught or learned: moral courage. You do what is right regardless of personal cost. That quality is rarer and more valuable than any technical skill." Outside the station, the solar storm continued to rage. Marcus watched the display of cosmic fury and wondered how his life had become so complicated so quickly. This morning he'd been worried about making his salvage quota. Now he was apparently humanity's ambassador to a previously unknown alien civilization. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we wait for the storm to pass," Zara said. "And, while we wait, I will tell you about the ethereal. You will learn of our history, our capabilities, and our place in the galactic community. This knowledge will help you understand the true scope of what your actions have set in motion. Marcus settled back in his chair. It seemed he was going to get an education whether he wanted one or not. The ethereal have existed for over 50,000 of your years, Zara began. We evolved on a world that existed at the intersection of multiple dimensional planes. This unique environment gave us abilities that other species lack: the capacity to manipulate space and time on a quantum level, the ability to share consciousness across vast distances, and, most importantly, the power to perceive the true nature of reality itself. As she spoke, images began to appear on Marcus's view screen. Impossible vistas of alien worlds where physics seemed to operate by different rules. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Beings of pure energy dancing through the vacuum of space. We discovered early in our development that the universe is far more complex than most species realize, Zara continued. What you perceive as solid matter is merely one layer of a vast multidimensional structure. We learned to navigate these layers, to draw power from the quantum foam itself. Marcus watched in fascination as the images shifted to show ethereal technology in action. Ships that could fold space to travel instantly between star systems. Weapons that could disrupt matter at the subatomic level. Construction techniques that could create structures spanning entire solar systems. Your people are young, Zara said, but they show remarkable potential. Most species develop along predictable paths. They become either purely logical like the Covenant, or militaristic like the Hegemony, or consumed by their emotions like the Zephyrians. But humans seem to maintain a balance between logic and emotion, between individual achievement and collective responsibility. That balance is rare and precious. You've been watching us, Marcus realized. From a distance, yes. We have observed human expansion into space, your conflicts, and your achievements. Some of my people believe humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable to be trusted with advanced knowledge. Others argue that your compassion and adaptability make you ideal partners for cosmic exploration. The images on the screen shifted to show human space from an external perspective. Marcus could see Earth, the Luna colonies, the mining stations around Jupiter, the research outposts in the outer system. From this cosmic viewpoint, human civilization looked both impressive and fragile. Your actions today will influence that debate significantly, Zara said. By risking your life for an unknown alien, you have demonstrated the best qualities of your species. But one person's actions, no matter how noble, cannot speak for an entire civilization. So this is a test, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Everything is a test when two species first encounter each other. The question is whether humanity will pass or fail. Marcus stared out at the solar storm and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. He was a simple man who fixed things and tried to do the right thing. Now he was apparently responsible for the future relationship between humanity and a civilization that could rewrite the laws of physics. No pressure at all. The solar storm raged for 14 hours. During that time, Marcus learned more about the universe than he'd thought possible. Zara spoke of cosmic mysteries that human science hadn't even begun to contemplate, of civilizations that had risen and fallen while Earth was still a ball of molten rock, of technologies that could reshape matter at the subatomic level. But what fascinated Marcus most were the smaller details. How the ethereal saw colors that existed beyond the visible spectrum. How they could sense the emotional resonance of different locations in space. How their culture was built around the concept of harmonic balance between different dimensional planes. Your people are remarkably adaptable, Zara observed as the storm finally began to subside. Most species become locked into rigid thinking patterns as they develop, but humans seem to maintain a flexibility that allows for continuous growth and change. Marcus stretched in his pilot's chair, working out the kinks from sitting in one position for so long. The radiation sickness had largely passed, though he still felt weak and nauseous. Maybe that's because we haven't been around long enough to get set in our ways. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is something more fundamental to human nature. Time will tell. The station's sensors detected the storm's end before Marcus's equipment did. External barriers began retracting, and The docking bay's atmospheric containment fields shifted to allow departure. Marcus ran through his pre-flight checklist, preparing to return to normal space. "Before you go," Zara said, "there is something you must understand. What happens next will not be easy. When word of our contact spreads, as it inevitably will, there will be those who oppose any relationship between our species. Opposition from humans or from the ethereal. From both. And from others as well. The galaxy is not a peaceful place, Marcus. There are powers that benefit from the current state of affairs, species that profit from conflict and mistrust. They will not welcome the prospect of humanity gaining access to ethereal knowledge." Marcus felt a chill at the implications. "Are you saying there's going to be trouble?" "I am saying that your act of compassion has consequences that extend far beyond either of our species. The hegemony, in particular, will not be pleased to learn that humans have potential allies with our capabilities." The hegemony was a militaristic alliance of species that had been probing human space for years, testing defenses, and looking for signs of weakness. If they learned that humans might gain access to advanced ethereal technology, it could trigger a preemptive strike. "Then, maybe we should keep this quiet," Marcus suggested. "At least until we figure out how to handle the situation." "Secrecy will only delay the inevitable," Zara replied. "And it would be a poor way to begin a relationship based on trust." "No, Marcus. The truth must come out. But we will control how and when it is revealed." Marcus initiated the undocking sequence, feeling the gentle vibration as the station's mechanical systems released the wandering star. As his ship pulled away from the Nexus station, he got his first clear view of the entire structure. It was even more magnificent than he'd realized, a geometric marvel that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions he couldn't perceive. "Where do I go from here?" Marcus asked as he set course back toward Titan Station. "First, you return to your people and make your report. Tell them the truth about what happened, about me, about the debt of honor. Let them react as they will. And then? Then, you will be contacted by others who wish to speak with you. Some will be allies, some will be enemies, and some will be testing you to determine which category they belong in. Trust your instincts, Marcus. They have served you well so far." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. "I'm going to need help with this. I can't handle galactic diplomacy on my own. You will not be alone. I have ways of watching over you. And there are others among the ethereal who are interested in humanity's potential. But, ultimately, the choices will be yours to make." The communication link began to weaken as Marcus moved away from the station's quantum transceivers. Zara's voice became more distant, though still clear. "One final thing, Marcus. In 3 days, you will receive visitors. They will claim to represent various human interests, but some will not be what they appear. Be very careful who you trust." "How do you know this?" "Because I know the hegemony's tactics. They have agents within human space, beings who appear human but serve other masters. They will try to learn everything they can about our contact, and they will use that knowledge to harm both our species." The link cut out, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the vast emptiness of space. He set course for Titan Station, but his mind was already racing ahead to the confrontations that awaited him. The journey back took 18 hours, and Marcus spent most of that time trying to figure out how to explain what had happened. How do you tell your superiors that you've made first contact with an unknown alien species? How do you explain that you've somehow become humanity's unofficial ambassador to a civilization that could provide technologies beyond imagination? When Marcus finally docked at Titan Station, he was met by a crowd of officials. Word of his prolonged absence had apparently sparked considerable concern, and everyone wanted answers. Sarah Martinez was there, along with Station Commander Admiral Richardson, several xenobiology specialists, and a collection of bureaucrats whose exact functions Marcus couldn't identify. "Chun," Admiral Richardson barked as Marcus emerged from his ship. "Report. Where the hell have you been for the past day and a half?" Marcus took a deep breath and began his story. He told them everything: the alien woman, the failing medical equipment, his decision to risk the solar storm, the rescue at the Nexus station, and his long conversation with Zara. He left out nothing, knowing that any deception would be discovered eventually. The reaction was about what he'd expected. Excitement from the scientists, concern from the military officers, and panic from the bureaucrats. Admiral Richardson's face grew more serious with each detail, and by the time Marcus finished, the man looked like he'd aged several years. "Son," the admiral said slowly, "do you have any idea what you've done?" "I saved someone's life," Marcus replied simply. "You've potentially changed the course of human history. First contact protocols exist for a reason. This should have been handled by trained diplomats, not a freelance salvage operator." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward. "With respect, Admiral, protocols are designed for predictable situations. If Mr. Chun hadn't acted when he did, the alien would have died, and we would never have known she existed. That might have been safer for everyone," muttered one of the bureaucrats. Marcus felt his temper flare. "Safer? We're talking about a person's life here, not a policy decision. She was dying, and I had the power to help her." End of story. Admiral Richardson held up a hand for silence. "The decision's been made, and we have to deal with the consequences. Chun, you're confined to the station until we can debrief you properly. Dr. Vasquez, I want a full analysis of his EVA suit sensor data. Everyone else, this information is classified at the highest levels until further notice." The next 48 hours were a blur of meetings, interviews, and medical examinations. Marcus told his story dozens of times to different groups of officials, scientists, and intelligence analysts. They scanned his suit's data recordings, analyzed his ship's sensor logs, and even subjected him to psychological evaluation to determine if the radiation exposure had affected his judgment. Through it all, Marcus maintained his conviction that he'd done the right thing. Yes, he'd violated protocols. Yes, he'd created a complicated diplomatic situation. But he'd also saved a life and potentially opened the door to a relationship with a powerful alien civilization. On the third day, exactly as Zara had predicted, the visitors arrived. The first delegation came through official channels. Ambassador Patricia Wells from the Earth Diplomatic Corps, accompanied by a team of xenological specialists and military advisors. They were professional, courteous, and completely focused on damage control. "Mr. Chun," Ambassador Wells said as they sat in Admiral Richardson's conference room, "I want you to understand that we appreciate your intentions. But first contact with an unknown species is an incredibly delicate matter. One wrong move could lead to misunderstandings with catastrophic consequences." "I understand that," Marcus replied. "But I also understand that sometimes you have to act on instinct." I looked into her eyes, and I saw someone who needed help. Everything else is just complications. The second delegation was less official. They claimed to be independent researchers, scientists who were fascinated by the prospect of ethereal technology. Their leader, Dr. James Morrison, was particularly interested in the quantum communication capabilities Zara had demonstrated. "Think of the possibilities," Morrison said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Instantaneous communication across galactic distances. It would revolutionize everything: commerce, exploration, military coordination. We could build an empire spanning the entire galaxy." Something about Morrison's enthusiasm made Marcus uncomfortable, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. The man seemed too eager, too focused on the potential applications rather than the implications. The third delegation didn't announce itself at all. Marcus was returning to his quarters after another long day of interviews when he found them waiting for him. Three figures in expensive suits who looked perfectly human, but somehow felt wrong in ways that set every instinct Marcus possessed screaming warnings. "Mr. Chun," the leader said in a voice that was just slightly too perfect, as if he'd learned English from recordings rather than growing up with it. "We represent certain interested parties who would like to discuss your recent experiences." Marcus backed toward the corridor, his hand moving instinctively toward the emergency call button on his sleeve. "I don't know who you are, but you're not supposed to be in the restricted areas. We go where we need to go," the figure said, taking a step forward. "You have information that our employers require. It would be much simpler if you cooperated voluntarily." That's when Marcus knew with absolute certainty that these weren't human beings. Their movements were too coordinated, their expressions too controlled. These had to be the hegemony agents Zara had warned him about. Marcus slapped the emergency button and dove for the corridor. Alarms began blaring throughout the station as security teams mobilized. The fake humans moved to pursue him, but their coordination became a liability in the narrow space. They got in each other's way, buying Marcus precious seconds to escape. He made it to the security checkpoint before they caught up with him. Station security guards surrounded the intruders, weapons drawn. For a moment, Marcus thought the situation was under control. Then, the fake humans began to change. Their perfectly human features melted like wax, revealing the crystalline bone structure and compound eyes that marked them as hegemony infiltrators. One of them lunged at the nearest security guard with movements too fast for human reflexes. The fight was brief, but vicious. The infiltrators were incredibly strong and fast, but they were outnumbered and far from any support. When it was over, 2 were dead, and the 3rd was in custody, though badly injured. Admiral Richardson arrived as the medics were hauling away the wounded guards. His face was grim as he surveyed the damage. "Well, Chun," he said, "it looks like your alien friend was right about one thing. This situation just got a lot more complicated." Marcus nodded, still shaking from the adrenaline rush. The game had changed. What started as a simple rescue had become something much larger and more dangerous. And he was still right in the middle of it. The real test was just beginning. The attack on Titan Station sent shockwaves through the human military hierarchy. Within hours, the station was placed under full lockdown, and Marcus found himself at the center of a security storm that reached all the way back to Earth. The discovery that hegemony infiltrators had penetrated human space undetected was bad enough. The fact that they'd been specifically targeting information about the ethereal made the situation exponentially worse. Marcus sat in a heavily guarded briefing room, facing a collection of the highest-ranking officials in human space. General Patricia Hayes, head of Earth Defense Command, had arrived via emergency transport. Director Michael Stone from Human Intelligence Services was participating via encrypted hologram. Even President Morrison herself had joined the meeting through secure channels. "Mr. Chun," President Morrison said, her image flickering slightly due to the transmission lag, "I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. We now know that alien infiltrators have been operating in our space, and they're specifically interested in your contact with this ethereal. That makes you both an invaluable asset and a significant security risk." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The past week had been a whirlwind of debriefings, medical examinations, and security protocols. He felt like a specimen being studied rather than a person. "With respect, Madam President," Marcus said, "I never asked to be in this position. I just did what I thought was right. And that's exactly why you're the right person for what comes next," General Hayes interjected. "Your actions were genuine, motivated by compassion rather than political calculation. That authenticity may be our greatest asset in building trust with the ethereal." Director Stone leaned forward in his holographic projection. "We've analyzed the communication logs from your encounter at the Nexus station. The quantum communication technology the ethereal possess could revolutionize our defensive capabilities. If the hegemony is trying to prevent us from accessing that technology, it tells us how valuable it really is." Admiral Richardson, who had remained silent through most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "The question is, what do we do now? The cat's out of the bag regarding Chen's contact with the ethereal. The hegemony knows about it, which means other alien powers will know soon enough. We need to decide how to proceed." President Morrison's expression was grave. "Mr. Chun, has the ethereal woman contacted you again since your return?" Marcus hesitated. The truth was that he'd been hearing Zara's voice sporadically over the past 3 days, always when he was alone, always brief. She'd warned him about the infiltrators, given him advice about who to trust, and assured him that ethereal observers were monitoring the situation. But admitting to ongoing contact would probably result in even more restrictions on his movement. "Yes," Marcus said finally. "She's been in touch. Irregularly, and only for short periods." The room erupted in excited murmurs. General Hayes leaned forward intently. "What has she told you?" "Mostly warnings. She predicted the hegemony infiltration attempt. She's also made it clear that the ethereal are watching how humanity handles this situation. They're treating it as a test of our character and judgment." Director Stone's holographic image flickered as he adjusted his connection. A test with potentially enormous consequences. Chun, I need you to understand something. Based on our analysis of the limited data you've provided, the ethereal possessed technology that could make humanity a major galactic power overnight. Faster than light communication, advanced energy weapons, dimensional manipulation. Any one of these technologies could change the balance of power in this entire sector of space. But, President Morrison added, such power would also make us a target. Every hostile species in the galaxy would view us as a threat to be eliminated. We need to proceed very carefully. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. What exactly are you asking me to do? General Hayes slid a data pad across the table to him. We're proposing to formalize your role as humanity's liaison to the ethereal. You would be given diplomatic status, full government backing, and access to whatever resources you need. In return, you would serve as our primary point of contact with their species. Marcus stared at the pad without reading it. I'm a salvage operator, not a diplomat. I fix broken machines and haul scrap metal. I'm not qualified for this kind of responsibility. With respect, Mr. Chun, President Morrison said gently, you're the most qualified person in human space. You're the only one the ethereal have chosen to communicate with. They trust you in a way they don't trust our governments or institutions. That trust is invaluable. Admiral Richardson nodded agreement. Besides, we're not throwing you into this alone. You'll have full diplomatic and technical support. But the relationship needs to be built on the foundation of trust you've already established. Marcus looked around the room at the assembled officials. These people held the fate of human civilization in their hands, and they were asking him to help them navigate the most important decision in human history. It was terrifying and humbling at the same time. If I agree to this, Marcus said slowly, I want certain guarantees. First, no military interference in my communications with the ethereal unless I specifically request it. Second, full transparency about any intelligence regarding threats to either species. And third, I want it understood that my loyalty is to the best interests of both humans and ethereal, not to any particular government or political agenda. General Hayes raised an eyebrow. Those are significant demands. They're necessary conditions, Marcus replied firmly. The ethereal value honesty and integrity above all else. If they sense that I'm being manipulated or that my communications are being filtered through political considerations, they'll cut off contact entirely. President Morrison was quiet for several moments, consulting with advisors outside the camera's view. Finally, she nodded. Agreed. You'll have the independence you need to build this relationship properly. That's when Zara's voice whispered through the room's communication system, startling everyone present. Your discussion is being monitored, she said, her musical voice somehow coming through the secured military channels. There are those among your leadership who do not have humanity's best interests at heart. Every official in the room froze. Director Stone's holographic image flickered as his technicians tried to trace the source of the transmission. General Hayes motioned frantically for her security team to scan for intrusion attempts. Zara, Marcus said aloud. How are you doing this? Quantum entanglement transcends your security protocols, she replied. I must speak with you privately, Marcus. There are developments you need to know about. President Morrison found her voice first. This is President Morrison of the United Earth Government. Are you the ethereal individual that Mr. Chin rescued? I am Zarathas, Speaker for the Ethereal Council in matters concerning humanity. And you, President Morrison, are in great danger. The hegemony infiltration of your space is far more extensive than you realize. The room erupted in urgent whispers and frantic communication with security teams. General Hayes was barking orders into her comm unit while Director Stone's image flickered as he coordinated with intelligence services across human space. What do you mean? President Morrison asked. The 3 agents discovered on Titan Station were merely the advanced scout team. There are hundreds of hegemony operatives embedded within your government, military, and corporate structures. They have been preparing for a coordinated strike against Earth itself. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Soon. The hegemony had planned to wait until humanity's expansion made you a credible threat to their dominance. But Marcus's contact with the ethereal has accelerated their timeline. They cannot risk humanity gaining access to our technology. General Hayes finished her urgent communications and turned back to the group. We're implementing Security Protocol 7 across all human installations. If there are that many infiltrators, we need to assume that every secure facility has been compromised. It may already be too late, Zara said. Even now, hegemony battle fleets are positioning themselves at the edge of your solar system. They plan to eliminate Earth's population centers while their agents sabotage your defensive installations from within. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. If Zara was right, humanity was facing an existential threat on a scale never before imagined. Earth itself was in danger. Can the ethereal help us? President Morrison asked. That is what the Council is debating even now. Some argue that direct intervention would violate our principles of non-interference. Others believe that humanity's potential justifies breaking that ancient law. Marcus stood up abruptly. What can I do? There has to be something. There is, Zara replied. But it would require you to leave human space and come to us. The Council has agreed to meet with humanity's representative, but that representative must be someone they trust absolutely. You are the only human who has earned that trust. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were asking Marcus to travel to an unknown alien world, to meet with beings whose technology and capabilities were beyond human understanding, and to somehow convince them to intervene in a war that could determine the survival of his species. If I go, Marcus said, what guarantee do I have that I'll ever see home again? None, Zara said honestly. Ethereal space is dangerous for humans. Our worlds exist partially in dimensions that human minds cannot fully process. Many who visit us are changed by the experience in ways that make returning to normal space difficult or impossible. General Hayes stepped forward. Mr. Chun, we can't ask you to take that risk. You're not asking, Marcus replied. I'm volunteering. If there's a chance that my going could save Earth, then I have to try. President Morrison's image leaned forward. Mr. Chun, if you do this, you'll be going as humanity's official ambassador. You'll have full authority to negotiate on behalf of our species. That's an enormous responsibility. Marcus nodded grimly. I understand. When do I leave? Now, Zara said. Every moment of delay increases the risk to your people. I am transmitting coordinates to your ship's navigation system. Follow them precisely. Any deviation could result in your ship being lost in dimensional space. As the officials around him scrambled to prepare for his departure, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm descend over him. A week ago, he'd been a simple salvage operator. Now he was about to embark on a journey that would take him to the edge of known space and beyond, carrying the hopes and fears of his entire species. He thought about the alien woman lying in that medical bay, dying until he'd chosen to risk everything to save her. That simple act of compassion had set in motion a chain of events that might determine the fate of two civilizations. As he prepared to leave human space behind, Marcus wondered if he would be strong enough for what lay ahead. The answer would determine whether humanity had a future among the stars or would become just another extinct species in the galaxy's long and violent history. The journey to ethereal space was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Following Zara's coordinates, the wandering star entered regions of space where the laws of physics seemed more like guidelines than absolute rules. Stars appeared in impossible colors, and space itself seemed to ripple like water disturbed by an unseen hand. You are approaching the boundary between dimensional layers, Zara's voice explained as Marcus watched his instrument struggle to make sense of the readings they were receiving. What you are seeing is the overlap between your three-dimensional space and the higher dimensions where my people exist. Marcus gripped his control stick tighter as the ship shuddered through what felt like turbulence in a vacuum. How do you live in this? How does anything survive in conditions like these? We evolved here, adapted to exist in multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. For us, your single-layer existence would feel claustrophobic and limiting. But do not worry. The council chambers exist in a stabilized zone that will be safe for your human physiology. The stabilized zone, when Marcus finally reached it, was breathtaking. Floating in space was what could only be described as a crystal palace the size of a moon. Its faceted surfaces reflected light that didn't exist in normal space, creating aurora patterns that shifted through colors Marcus didn't have names for. As his ship approached, docking structures unfolded to receive him with the same fluid grace he'd witnessed at the Nexus station. "Welcome to the heart of harmony," Zara said as Marcus's ship was gently guided into a docking bay. "You are the first human ever to set foot in the seat of ethereal civilization." Marcus suited up carefully, checking his life support systems multiple times. He had no idea what kind of atmosphere awaited him, or even if the concept of atmosphere applied in a place where multiple dimensions intersected. But when he stepped out of his ship, he found himself in a chamber filled with breathable air that somehow tasted like spring rain and distant music. Zara was waiting for him. Seeing her in person was even more overwhelming than their brief encounter in the medical bay. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her luminescent skin pulsing gently with patterns that seemed to reflect her emotional state. Her fiber-optic hair moved as if underwater, each strand glowing with its own internal light. She was beautiful in a way that transcended human concepts of aesthetics. She was living art, a being of grace and power that made Marcus feel crude and clumsy by comparison. "Marcus," she said, and her voice in person had harmonics that resonated in his bones. "Thank you for coming. I know this journey was not easy for you." "It was necessary," Marcus replied, finding his voice somewhat hoarse. "If there's a chance to save my people, I had to try." Zara nodded, her silver eyes studying him with an intensity that was both comforting and unnerving. "The Council is eager to meet you, but first, there is something you must understand. What you are about to witness will challenge everything you believe about the nature of reality. The Council exists in a state of consciousness that spans multiple dimensional planes. To communicate with them, you will need to temporarily expand your perceptual awareness." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that I must create a neural link between us, similar to what happened when you touched my hand, but much deeper. Through me, you will be able to perceive and communicate with beings that exist primarily in higher dimensions. The experience can be overwhelming for human minds." "Will it hurt?" Zara's expression softened with something that might have been compassion. "Not physically, but you will see and understand things that human consciousness was never designed to process. Some of what you learn cannot be unlearned. You may find it difficult to return to your previous limited perception of reality." Marcus thought about Earth, about the hegemony fleets gathering at the edge of the solar system, about billions of people who had no idea their lives hung in the balance. "I accept the risk." Zara led him through corridors that defied architectural logic, past chambers where impossible geometries created spaces larger on the inside than the outside. They encountered other ethereal beings along the way, tall, graceful figures who regarded Marcus with curiosity and what might have been approval. The council chamber was vast, its crystalline walls stretching up into dimensions Marcus couldn't quite perceive. At its center was a pool of what looked like liquid starlight, and around that pool stood 12 figures that hurt to look at directly. They existed primarily in higher dimensions, appearing to Marcus as shifting columns of light and energy that occasionally resolved into almost familiar forms before dissolving back into abstraction. "Council of the Ethereal," Zara said formally. "I present Marcus Chun, representative of humanity and holder of the life debt." The response came not as words but as a symphony of thought and emotion that washed over Marcus like a tidal wave. He staggered, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of communication from beings whose consciousness operated on a completely different level than his own. Zara steadied him with one graceful hand. "Allow me to create the link. Trust me, Marcus." She placed her other hand on his forehead, and suddenly, Marcus could understand the council's communication. Their thoughts flowed through his mind like music, complex harmonies of logic and emotion that conveyed more meaning in seconds than human speech could manage in hours. "Welcome, young one." The council spoke with a unified voice that somehow maintained individual nuances. Zarathes has told us of your courage. We would know more of humanity through your mind. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding, his awareness stretching across dimensions he hadn't known existed. Through the neural link with Zara, he could perceive the council members not as mere beings of light, but as vast intelligences that had existed for millennia, accumulating knowledge and wisdom on a scale that dwarfed human civilization. Show US. Asterisk they requested. And suddenly, Marcus found his memories laid bare before these cosmic entities. They witnessed his childhood on Earth, his military service, his years as a salvage operator. They saw his decision to risk everything for an unknown alien, felt the emotions that had driven him to act without regard for personal safety. But they also saw more than his individual memories. Through the link, they experienced humanity itself, the species' capacity for both great compassion and terrible cruelty, its drive to explore and expand, its ability to adapt and overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Interesting, asterisk the council observed. Asterisk your species balances logic and emotion in ways we had not anticipated. Most young civilizations lean heavily toward one or the other. Asterisk, we're still learning how to balance them, Marcus said, his voice sounding strange in his own ears as it carried across dimensional planes. We make mistakes, but we try to learn from them. The hegemony sees humanity as a threat to be eliminated, asterisk one council member observed. They fear your potential for growth and adaptation. They are not wrong to fear, asterisk another added. Asterisk your species shows remarkable potential. Given time, you could become a dominant force in galactic civilization. Asterisk Marcus felt a surge of hope. Does that mean you'll help us? The council's response was complex, layered with thousands of years of careful deliberation. Asterisk help is a complicated concept. Direct intervention in species conflicts violates our fundamental principles. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for 50 millennia without interfering. Asterisk, but, Marcus pressed, this is different. The hegemony isn't just trying to conquer us. They're planning genocide. Billions of innocent people will die. Billions have died before. Asterisk the council replied with what might have been sadness. Asterisk such is the nature of galactic evolution. Species that cannot defend themselves perish. Those that can survive and grow stronger. Asterisk Marcus felt despair beginning to overwhelm him. Had he come all this way only to be told that the ethereal would stand by and watch humanity be exterminated? But then, Zara's voice whispered through the neural link, meant for him alone. Asterisk show them your true strength, Marcus. Not your weapons or your technology, but what makes humans unique. Asterisk understanding flooded through Marcus. The council wasn't testing humanity's military might or technological capability. They were testing something much more fundamental, the moral courage that had brought him here in the first place. You're right, Marcus said, addressing the council directly. Humanity can't defend itself against the hegemony. We're too young, too weak, too unprepared. But that's exactly why we need your help. Not because we deserve it, not because we've earned it, but because helping others is the right thing to do. He opened his mind completely, sharing not just his own memories, but his understanding of human nature. He showed them humanity's capacity for self-sacrifice, the way humans would risk everything to save complete strangers. He shared the stories of humans who had died protecting others, who had given up their own comfort to help those in need, who had chosen compassion over personal gain time and time again. You argue for assistance based on virtue rather than strength, asterisk the council observed. Yes, Marcus said simply. Because strength without virtue is just another form of tyranny. The hegemony is strong, but they use that strength to oppress others. Humanity may be weak, but we try to use what little power we have to help and protect. Isn't that worth preserving? The council fell silent, their collective consciousness turning inward in contemplation. Marcus could feel the weight of their deliberation, these ancient beings weighing the fate of his species against principles that had governed their actions for millennia. Finally, they reached their decision. We cannot directly intervene, asterisk they announced, and Marcus felt his heart sink. Asterisk, but the debt of honor remains. Zarathus's life was saved by human courage and compassion. That debt demands repayment. Asterisk Zara stepped forward, her luminescent form brightening with sudden energy. I claim the right to act independently of council restrictions. The life debt supersedes the non-interference principles. So be it, Asterisk, the council agreed. Asterisk, but know that your actions will have consequences. The balance of galactic power will shift. Other species will take notice. Asterisk, I understand and accept the responsibility, Zara replied. She turned to Marcus, and, through their neural link, he felt the full scope of what she was offering. Not just her individual power, but access to ethereal technology and knowledge. She would come to Earth herself, bringing weapons and defenses that could stand against the hegemony assault. But there was a price. If I do this, Zara said aloud, I can never return to ethereal space. My people do not involve themselves in the affairs of younger species. By choosing to act, I would be exiling myself from my own civilization. Marcus stared at her in shock. You would give up everything? Your home, your people, your entire way of life. As you were willing to give up your life for mine, Zara replied simply. The debt demands no less. The magnitude of her sacrifice hit Marcus like a physical blow. She wasn't just offering to help humanity. She was offering to abandon everything she'd ever known, to become a permanent exile from her own species, all to repay a debt created by his moment of compassion in a medical bay. Zara, Marcus said quietly, I can't ask you to do that. You are not asking, she replied with a smile that transcended species boundaries. I am choosing, just as you chose to risk everything for a stranger. Some actions create bonds that transcend individual considerations. The council spoke one final time. Asterisk, the choice is made. Zarathis will accompany you to Earth. She will bring knowledge and power sufficient to defend your world against the hegemony assault. But know this, Marcus Chun, this is only the beginning. By choosing to help humanity, we have set in motion events that will reshape the galaxy. The responsibility for what comes next rests with your species. Asterisk, the neural link dissolved, leaving Marcus feeling strangely empty after the vastness of the council's consciousness. But Zara remained beside him, her presence warm and reassuring in the crystal chamber. Come, she said, taking his hand. We have a world to save. As they walked back through the impossible corridors of the Heart of Harmony, Marcus marveled at the chain of events that had brought him to this moment. A simple act of compassion had become something cosmic in scope, rippling outward to affect the fate of civilizations. The return journey to Earth was swifter than the outbound trip, aided by ethereal technology that folded space and time to their will. Zara's ship, a vessel of living crystal that responded to her thoughts, carried both their vessels back to human space in a matter of hours. They arrived to find Earth's defenses mobilizing for a desperate last stand. The hegemony fleet had indeed positioned itself at the edge of the solar system, hundreds of warships preparing for an assault that would have overwhelmed human defenses completely. But Zara's arrival changed everything. The weapons she brought were not just advanced, they were transformative. Energy shields that could deflect planet-killing weapons, defensive platforms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, communication systems that allowed instantaneous coordination across the entire solar system. The battle, when it came, was over in hours rather than days. The hegemony, faced with technology they couldn't understand or counter, retreated after losing half their fleet to weapons that struck from dimensions they couldn't perceive. In the aftermath, as Earth celebrated its survival, and Marcus found himself hailed as a hero across human space, he sat with Zara in the quiet of his small apartment, watching the stars through his window. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Giving up your home, your people? Zara was quiet for a long moment, her luminescent hair dimming to a soft glow. Home is not a place, she said finally. It is the connections we forge, the bonds we choose to honor. I have found a new home here, with beings who understand the value of compassion. Marcus nodded, understanding flooding through him. The reward she had spoken of wasn't technology or power. It was belonging, the chance to be part of something larger than herself, to protect and nurture a young species that had shown such promise. Besides, Zara added with something that might have been humor, someone needs to keep an eye on humanity as you expand into the galaxy. You have great potential, but also great capacity for trouble. Marcus laughed, the first genuine laughter he'd experienced in weeks. I suppose you're right about that. As they watched the stars together, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He'd risked his life for an alien woman and received the greatest reward imaginable, not just the salvation of his species, but the knowledge that compassion, courage, and sacrifice could literally reshape the cosmos. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers yet to be discovered. But humanity would face that future not alone, but with the wisdom and friendship of beings who understood that true strength came not from power, but from the willingness to use that power in service of others. And, in the end, Marcus thought, that made all the difference.